In a way, the Songs of Home exhibition has actually grown out of a silence, a forgetfulness about the way houses in the past sounded, how people made music in their homes. We've been digging into collections, looking at instruments and the printed music to see how these families actually made music. Imagine if we turned the music off in our own homes now. Well, we've gone back and we're reanimating the past of early Sydney's music world. We're downloading, streaming the sounds of history. At Sydney Living Museums, we care for a number of historic house museums, each with their own unique musical story. We've been working through the collections over the last few years, looking at instruments and the sheet music collections in particular. And we've made quite a few discoveries. One of the most significant finds was a collection of music we discovered at Rouse Hill House and Farm. It was put together by a family in the 1830s and bound in about 1840. It's really important because it contains some of the earliest music manuscripts made in Australia. It also contains printed music, which has pencil ornaments written into the music, which helps us understand how these people actually sang. It also contains a singing method, instructions in singing, which we know would have been used to help people understand how to sing their music. It's a bit like the Rosetta Stone of music performance for Sydney-siders in the 1830s. After a bit of research, we discovered that the music collection belonged to a young, colourful couple from Sydney called Lilius and Willoughby Dowling. Lilius was the daughter of John Dixon, an industrialist who brought the first steam engine to Australia in 1813. The Dowling Songbook gave us the perfect opportunity to explore the sound world of Lilius and Willoughby Dowling in one of our historic houses. We chose Elizabeth Bay House because it was close to where they lived in Paddington and may well have been a house they knew. So I asked Neil Perez da Costa, head of the Historical Performance Division of the Sydney Conservatorium of Music, whether he and his students would like to explore the Dowling Songbook and recreate what it would have been like for the Dowlings in their home.
Matthew showed me through the book, and looking at it, realised that there were markings in it, annotations, and we were discussing where they would have come from or how they might have appeared there, and it might have been through lessons, singing lessons that the Dowlings had, and the next really interesting thing was that at the back of the book was this singing treatise which had been bound into it by Grosser. And I immediately thought about our students in the historical performance unit at the Conservatorium, because we are working in this field, and certainly we're working in the early 19th century more and more these days. And I could see that there could be something really valuable for the students to look at here. First of all, here's a book that was put together in Sydney of music brought over from Europe, and we might have the opportunity to perform the music in a historic house. So the richness of this, as I've explained to the students, is understanding what happened in that sort of early colonial period in Sydney's history as entertainment in grand houses, but not just grand houses, probably just in ordinary people's houses. Having a book with a collection of music annotated, these are the sorts of things, the artifacts that we're always looking for. We want to know what people did in the past. So it's very interesting to see if there are breath marks marked in, which there are in some of the songs. Extra ornamentation. I mean, there are 3 or 4 songs which are brimming with extra notes. Actually quite difficult to sing. Partly because our singers are not used to singing such florid ornamentation. They're not taught in the same sort of way. Through the earth and all the splashing on the wind. Okay, so this would be, that's the outline, but let's just work on the first bit of that. On the wings of every rushing. Yeah, there you go. Fill in the notes. Something like that, that's plausible. The art of adding ornaments, like quite florid, lots of notes where there were just a few notes originally, is something that's gone out of fashion, really. For some of our students, it's completely new and difficult because they haven't got the agility to do it. So we've thrown this at them. You know, I had to sort of think carefully which singers will I give this to, because some won't be able to do it, some will have a go. And what we wanted is the ones who would have a go, and you have to be a bit gung-ho about it and just throw yourself into it. And by and large, I think that they have. Though while doing it, they've always been complaining and saying, how could she have taken a breath here? That's just illogical, da 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 da. And I've been trying to say to them, don't judge what's in that part by our modern standards, because it's clear from the information we have from the 19th century that people did things in a very different way. So just like live with it, you know, accept it, just make it your own, it'll be fine. And the experiment is here. How does it feel to do what they did? You know, in a way, that's what you learn. It's your teacher. You can use that, the score and the treatise that was bound into the Dowling Songbook as the master teacher. So let's just check something.
But the heart ne'er feels in sorrow shrouded, the light of other days.
Yes,
But the heart ne'er feels in sorrow shrouded. Oh,
so
shrouded.
to dee da 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 dee. And then you've got all these here as well, so there's a break there.
Crikey.
The ornamentation has been really interesting because we need to be doing what Lilius wrote. In a modern setting, if I had been given that sheet music and it might have had a few pencil markings in, I would have gone, you know what, just no, I don't, they're not really needed. In one of the pieces, she's in love with the word round, and every time it comes up, she has to do, she has to go round with the notes, which I personally don't engage with, but you have to throw that away and go, because I'm trying to recreate how she saw this music. I don't play a part in this.
I suppose doing other classical music, you do it as the book says. You don't add stuff, you don't make up things or look at try and make it historically accurate. You just do it as it's written. So it was really interesting to see how they just kind of added things to make it their own kind of personal song in a way, and trying to do it.
Okay, we'll have a look at that.
It's starting to make sense. It's still hard to always put it into action because it's, just so foreign. But yeah, it definitely makes sense on the page, just getting it out there. It's a bit tricky.
Do you ever dream of me, love, when the
I suppose I found it very interesting to compare some of the historical practices that the Dowling family have sketched into the repertoire. The embellishments, which seem in some ways to be quite outlandish.
So it's feel I love these. Trill here. There's a lot of things. I gave you this one because of all the ornaments, because I knew you could do them. That's a trill, yeah?
I was quite amazed at the technique and agility that these singers must have had to be able to execute these embellishments well. The other thought that came to my head was maybe the people that were performing this music actually had poor taste in some of their choices when it came to the embellishments.
Oft my heart vibrates to thee, love, to thee, love, to
The other side of it is we decided, well, what sort of sound source would we use for accompanying these songs? And of course, the most obvious thing is to have a square piano.
The square piano in the late 18th century was the domestic piano, sort of the modern day upright piano of the home, basically. It's very well suited to the music of this period.
Well, the collard is very interesting because usually, I know especially in this country, there are a lot of square pianos imported from the UK, but actually not many of them work. Rather than approaching this as a modern musician looking backwards at this music, I'm applying what I've learnt from harpsichord playing and moving that forward because it only makes sense as in the earliest pianists were actually harpsichordists.
As a modern flute player, when you play with a piano, it's very easy to be overpowered by the piano. It's just an incredible beast. It's very loud, it spits fire at you. Whereas the square piano, it's much softer in terms of volume, but much easier to blend with. It's a dream come true, really. It's very incredible.
An interesting thing during this project that we're doing, playing this square piano, the collard, quite a few of them have sort of found it hard to get a sound out of it because it's a foreign thing, they just don't know quite how to do it. So it's been very interesting watching them tackle that. It's beautiful.
It really helped when studying the music, again, because you study it in a practice room with a modern piano and you think, oh gosh, some of these ornaments for real, I just don't, I think it sounds kind of strange. And then when you step into the drawing room and you see even just the nature of the ornaments on the cabinets and all the frames on the paintings, and suddenly the sound world that Lilius has written added to the music makes so much more sense.
The Dowling project is a really interesting one from my perspective. I don't come from a musical background, but I do understand the importance that music played in the lives of people in the 19th century. For instance, in our drawing room we have a piano to suggest that music was a very important element of the way people lived and interacted.
It definitely makes for a much more homely atmosphere if you come home and you pull out your, in my case, Dowland quintets and have a bash through them. I could very, very easily imagine a similar thing happening. You know, they come home and they sit around the piano and they play some of this music from the book. It'd make for a much more homely atmosphere, I would say.
A lot of my family is quite musical, so we'll all have a gig. Like my uncle, he plays violin, and my auntie, she plays guitar and viola and everything. So we'll just have a strum and stuff in the living room, which is sort of a little bit similar to what we're doing there.
For me, it's really exciting to have a project like this take place in a home like Elizabeth Bay House. To have students come in and play on instruments from the period, playing music that we know was being played in Sydney at that time, essentially in an interior very similar to the Dowling's interior. It adds this wonderful element that is so difficult to recreate.
Playing in Elizabeth Bay House has been probably one of my favourite musical endeavours of my tertiary career. It's been quite amazing to be exploring this chamber music in a period chamber setting, which is something we don't have in Australia. You know, if I'm playing the chamber music of J.S. Bach, I can't go to Zimmerman's coffee house and play it there, but I can play, you know, these 1830s flute sonatas in an 1830s Australian house. And it just makes the music really come alive, especially with the piano we're using. I can't think of a better way of doing it, actually. It's proper historically informed performance.
And I think it creates a different acoustic world to what we as modern listeners are expecting. In a way, you push the audience to go, okay, you really have to use your imaginations too, because we're recreating as opposed to creating music that's going to entertain you as a modern listener. We're trying to bring you with us on an imagination tour.
You know, it is always a little bit challenging, I think, for everyone to really imagine what it would be like to live in these homes. We come in and we know that the families lived here, we know they did certain things, but to really imagine those things happening, because, you know, the past is really quite foreign to us now, but when you have the music performed, when you are sitting in this room, you can really immerse yourself in that kind of lifestyle. It creates a much fuller experience and a much more believable experience of what it would have been like to live in the past.
So I'm doing a vocal duet based on Mozart, and I'm doing 2 songs that are very much upper class drawing room. They're all about light and beauty, and you can imagine a genteel lady sitting, could be in any BBC drama in Australia. And then I'm doing a song called Robin Adair, which is very much a pub song. There's a great line about drinking a hogshead out and foul named out, and it's just this sense of fun, this sense of raucous, and it creates a very contrasting world to that of the other drawing room songs that you're doing. So you get the sense that they also knew how to have fun. And you can imagine them, the last song of the night, getting up and having a bit of a dance and joining in, and it's great to have those contrasting pieces. I think you get a more in-depth view into the people who would have been entertained and the people who lived in the house.
The students were incredibly enthusiastic. You know, you get a group of young people together in a different environment. We kind of let them run pretty free through the house, and they loved it. They were very respectful of the spaces, but they also just took their instruments and spread out. And so on rehearsal days, you might have someone in the saloon playing, you know, a bit of country on their guitar that was made in 1850, and someone else having a go on the piano, and someone upstairs playing a flute, and, you know, someone in the library on their oboe, and the girls practicing their singing together. It was really fun to see how much they just felt at home in the house and took over the house when they were here, and off they went and made noise, and yeah, it was good fun to see their enthusiasm and to really bring a whole lot of life and a whole lot of noise to the house.